All right, so this is pretty much just a sort of wrap up of the 2 days. We've gone through a lot of conversations, a lot of ideas, a lot of debates, and I see the room is thinning out very quickly, so I'll keep this quite short because I'm sure all of you have flights to catch and places to be. Just a important sort of logistical point first, though. All of the presentations that have been made since yesterday will be available to all of you soon after the conference, maybe later today. You'll probably get an email where you'll have to fill out a feedback form, and once you fill out that feedback form, you'll have access to download all these presentations. So please feel free to take advantage of that as well. So the way I thought about this, I spent some time speaking to my colleagues and trying to really sort of distill some 4 or 5 of the key themes that we thought arose out of the conference since yesterday and over to today. Obviously, each of these points don't capture everything that happened, but I think for my sense, if there are a few things that we should walk away with from this conference, it's these 4 or 5 things. And the first is, unfortunately, I guess, the fact that the market has been structured really well. The energy transition is an important sort of leap forward for the market. It's a great framework. It's a framework that has been put together in a fairly collaborative way, and it's a largely transparent framework. And yet, it's a framework that, at this point, at least for solar, has a lot of uncertainty. And that's uncertainty which I think everyone realizes exists, and everyone understands has to be sort of played out and worked with over the next months. I think there's also confidence that the government agencies will actually work in a proactive manner and in a positive, forward-moving manner to remove those uncertainties in the market. So that's actually the good part. But that shows up more so in the sort of auctions and the utility scale space. So we have heard that at least over the next months, the government is really committed to ironing out any kinks in the execution of the clean energy auctions in March to really make sure that first big boost that first big sort of clean energy auction, at least as part of this new energy paradigm, runs smoothly and works well. So that's great news for all the utility scale developers. And at the same time, the reality is that there is a lot of lingering uncertainty for the distributed generation segment, and it doesn't seem like the government will actually come around to really addressing some of that uncertainty for the distributed generation segment before perhaps the middle of the year or maybe even the end of the year. So that's something that I think we should just keep in mind. The other sort of important takeaway for me was the fact that there are certain core challenges to project economics across the board for solar right now, and we have to really recognize them and then make sure that we can work around those challenges. And the first sort of challenge is the fact that the peso has been depreciating, and there's immense pressure on the currency to further devalue, and that really makes it that much tougher for solar projects to work, especially because a lot of the components are coming in from abroad, denominated in dollars. And I think the bigger challenge there will be to appropriately hedge for any expectations of future devaluation. And that's something everyone has to keep in mind. The other challenge for the industry overall, across all segments, is the fact that there are tariffs on modules, on imported modules, and that fundamentally sort of increases costs and takes the edge out of solar's competitiveness that much more, especially when we think about clean energy auctions where we are competing with all sorts of other energy sources. And then I think for the distributed generation segment, there's a huge kind of bottleneck or barrier for project economics to work, electricity prices being the biggest part of that, right? We know electricity prices have fallen over the last year. It's just the reality of the market. The rhetoric is that the prices are going to continue to fall. And honestly, even if prices don't continue to fall and actually stabilize and perhaps even rise in the future, there has been considerable damage that has been done to end customer sentiment around solar, because customers believe electricity is going to be cheaper. I don't need to go solar anymore. And we know the government has very proactively sent out that message to justify the energy reform. And that, in many ways, is upsetting the kind of dynamic that was actually building quite well over the last year for distributed generation. And that's something we have to just keep in mind. I think thirdly, a big consensus has been around the fact that the clean energy auctions really are the sort of primary opportunity, at least for the short term, for solar. And by short term, I mean maybe just a year, this year, for solar in Mexico. And a big part of that is the fact that, there is this is the segment of the market that has the greatest attention by the government. It's also the segment of the market that's the most sort of visible to financiers. And financiers, I think, are a lot more comfortable, at least within the utility scale segment, notwithstanding all the overall challenges, to really work with projects in the auctions, given that PPAs will essentially be with CFE in this first phase at least, compared to other opportunities around the wholesale market, which is yet to pick up, and compared to perhaps bilateral contracts that many people might still be able to pull together, coming out of earlier conversations around the self-supply program. So the opportunity within that utility scale segment, and in many ways in the market overall, is pretty much the clean energy auctions. I think fourthly, I would say that what's been really encouraging is that despite all these challenges, solar is looking to be a key player in this first auction. I mean, we saw that in the polling a little earlier as well. And I think, it's been really heartening because the auctions in the way they're structured right now aren't the most favorable to solar, right? I mean, solar is competing with all these other energy sources. We just heard yesterday that the benchmark pricing that has been announced is extremely aggressive, so further putting pressure on solar. We've also heard that the pre-bid, the bid qualification, the pre-bid sort of amounts that are needed are extremely prohibitive, and the requirements there are very prohibitive. So there are a lot of sort of barriers that are stacked up against solar. And yet it's quite encouraging that I think by and large, by consensus, people are expecting at least about 100 developers to move forward with these projects, to move forward with bidding for projects in the auctions. And that's quite a significant number, at least to my mind, given the kind of challenges that solar is stacked up against. And I mean, my personal goal was to sort of eke out from everyone here at the conference some sense of how many megawatts we can expect for solar in the auction. But I'm sorry to say that that's still anybody's guess. So we'll all just have to wait patiently and see what comes up for solar in these auctions. But I think there's a tremendous amount of optimism around what that number might be. And I think lastly, just to finish up, I've learned a very big lesson at this conference, one that I don't often hear, and which is that the 5 gigawatt cumulative market forecast that I've put together for solar in Mexico is being seen by a lot of players here as being too conservative. And that's not an accusation that I face too often. So that's quite heartening. And I think I'll be actually spending the next days trying to understand if that is indeed true or not, if indeed, the market can be much more than 5 gigawatt on a cumulative basis by 2020. But whether that's true or not, I think the sense that I've got is a lot more encouraging, which is that, there's enough energy and ambition in this room right now, in the halls outside, and in the Mexican solar market overall, to really, beat that number. And I really hope that all of us from here are taking the ideas and the discussions that we've had at this conference over the past 2 days to really, make this year a really exciting and a really ambitious year for solar, and that allows us to put much more solar in Mexico than any of us, I think, have imagined even today and yesterday. So with that, I really thank you all very much for joining us for this conference. It's been really encouraging for us to see the kind of interest that you've all brought here, to see the large number of people, some of the best names and the biggest names, and some of the have joined us for this conference, and the kind of seriousness that all of you have brought to Mexican solar has really been very encouraging for us. So we've had a very great time. I hope you've all had a great time as well, and we'll surely see all of you here again next year. Thanks a lot.